Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you at the end of what has been a bit of a quiet week, but no less an important week in the National Football League because this was the week that we had the NFL Combine, which usually brings out a couple of stories, and indeed it did. It did this time. Nothing really major or big, although the performance of Jeremiah Love seems to have caught a lot of attention. But just in general, the combine didn't really make as many headlines as it perhaps could or should have done. There was GMs talking that would have brought a few things, but the actual combine itself didn't really bring anything. But we'll get into that because I have some thoughts on the combine itself, and we'll get into that. That is our second topic on the docket for today. But before we do that, we're going to have to go through the first topic. And before we even do that, we have to do the introduction and the admin, which is simply saying thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you are new and you are listening to this, well, you are only listening to this on YouTube because it's the only place we publish it. So if you're hearing this somewhere else, then something's gone wrong because we only really publish it on YouTube. But yeah, if you are listening on YouTube, feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, leave a comment, do everything that you can in order to help this thing grow, continue to grow as it were. Don't forget, we are also on our other social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and we are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So give us a like or follow or subscribe or whatever you need to do on those channels. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for continuing to make me a part of your week. Right, and with that being said, we need to get into the topics. And again, we'll get into the combine a little bit later, but news that sort of surrounds the combine because again, there's a chance for competition committees and GMs to meet. So I have a couple of headlines. And one of the ones that sort of struck me, the big one that struck me, is the news that the NFL is considering allowing replay officials to, they say throw flags, but I don't know if you can really throw flags if you're a replay official. You can buzz in, you can call for a penalty. You can't necessarily throw a flag. What's it going to do? Because you're in an office in New York. What's throwing a flag going to do? But you get what we're saying. So they are saying, and this was a quote from Troy Vincent, who's the NFL Executive Vice President of Football Operations, suggesting the possibility is there that they want the replay official. So the Sky Judge, I think, is the term that's been used because that was created in the UFL to basically look at a play, and if the referees miss something, then they can call it. Now, at the moment, they're going to start it with what they call non-football acts. I'll read you the quote. He says, "You don't want to just be expanding the Pandora's box," says Troy Vincent. "But we believe that things like the non-football act, you can really, really restrict what that is. That's something that we believe that potentially there's a little bit of tweaking in the language. That may be the first step." So basically what they're calling for in that situation is if something, again, a non-football act is missed. So if someone throws a punch or there's a little bit of a scuffle or something goes on, maybe the DK Metcalf incident with the Detroit Lions fan, maybe something like that, not to do with the game of football. So not looking at going to holding or pass interference, which was obviously something that came in a couple of years ago, the pass interference review, but that sort of got scrapped along the way. Nothing along those lines. You don't want to go and review that because that's too subjective. And, I sort of understand that on the surface. So what they're going to look at is, after the play, after the whistle, everything that isn't to do with the actual place. That's why I say like scuffles or fan stuff, or maybe, something along those lines. If, I can't remember if he got punished for it, but just an incident's coming to the top of my head is the Indomitian Sue incident on Thanksgiving when he was with the Lions and he kicked Aaron Rodgers in the nether regions, shall we say. I can't remember if he got punished for that in the moment, but that's something that the NFL, the replay official who's looking at extra footage, as it were, can go and look and say, right, let's go call that. Hey, you missed this. This was going on behind the play. Let's kick this guy out, or let's give them their first warning towards a potential disqualification and all that sort of stuff. Now, this is something that I like the intent of when it comes to the NFL. And the fact that Troy Vincent said right away, you don't want to open Pandora's box. You don't want to be expanding that. So let's keep it to just this to start with. I think it's a great idea because if you open up straight away to everything, then you are just going to get so many complaints from fans that say, if you do open up to, again, to every play, if the fan at home can see a hold, but the replay official misses the hold, then that's just gonna increase the anger because the referees on the field missed it, and the referee in New York in the office missed it as well. So yeah, by leaving it to something like that, to start off with, I think is a good intention because this is again something that can be then addressed further down the line. And if you say, okay, we want to start with off the field stuff or behind the play stuff, as it were, I think that's fine because then at least it gives some level of the gradualness, if that's even a word. But the fact they're going to introduce it gradually just gives us that chance to get used to it. And then maybe further down the line, we'll say, okay, then we're going to, you know, then we're going to bring it in for holding, or then we're going to bring it in for, I know, if a player's down by contact or whatever, that's not really a penalty, but you get what I'm saying. Is we'll start with this, we'll maybe give it 2 or 3 years, we're not going to rush it, and then we're going to say, okay, what else can we do with it? If the referees on the field missed it, let's then go into, I think, a good chance to get, as I say, to get fans used to it, to do it gradually. I think that's the right way to do it. So I like this idea, and again, I like the fact they're doing it gradually. But it is one of those things, that someone is going to complain, but I feel most fans would probably be on board with this. To how exactly it's going to be officiated, because again, the timing wise of it all, what happens if it's happening in the hurry up offense in the last 2 minutes of in the half or whatever? Is there going to be enough time for the replay officials to call in? Is there going to be a bit of, because there's a bit of the delay between the game and the stadium? How's that going to factor into it? There are a lot of niggles that need to go in with this, but I think they are going to find a good way to get the balance. I think starting off this way is the right way to do it. And with that, we move on to our next subject, which is the NFL Combine. And this is a point that I think I brought up last year. Again, if I didn't bring it up on this podcast, I've certainly brought it up elsewhere. So forgive me if I get confused with where exactly I've spoken about it. But I do think we are coming to the days where the Combine is going to either come to an end or significantly change. Because I still fail to see the importance of the athletic part of the combine, because I don't see where the biggest part for me is the fact there's a lack of pads. I don't know how much weight difference it adds to it because every position player is different and what kind of pads they have and whatever. It will make a slight difference. But for instance, the 40-yard dash. Okay, I get the importance of the 40-yard dash and the fact that, if it goes back to special teams, I think it is, because the average punt, I believe, I remember seeing a story about this. The average punt back when the combine started was 40 yards. So they want to see how quickly this person can get to 40 yards to cover a punt. I get that. But how is that important for a quarterback, for instance? They're not going to be running on special teams doing a punt. Okay, fine. But I still want to see how quickly it is. Okay, fine. If you want to have that, that's fine. But surely you'd want to see them in pads and helmets because that gives you a true sense of what they are. Again, it may be a quarter of a second difference. I don't know exactly what difference it makes. And again, as I say, the pads, everyone has different. Some will be a little bit more heavier, some will be lighter, some will, different equipment might be more aerodynamic, quote unquote, whatever. Again, how tightly they wear their sleeves could make a difference, as with all this science stuff that goes on these days, all that stuff. But it would make a difference. That way you get a true sense of how quickly they can run. I don't see the importance of, or Ty Simpson, just to throw a name out. Okay, he can run the 40-yard dash in, 4.8 seconds. I haven't seen his numbers. This is kind of the point. But he can run in 4.8 seconds. Okay, fine. Put in pads, he runs it in 4.9. Surely that's a more... All that sort of stuff, it just doesn't make sense to me. The throwing, to players that they're not used to, again, just what is that really doing? If you want to see what a quarterback is good at, you want to have someone they're familiar with. Yes, they're going to have players that they're not familiar with when they get to training camp, but give it a while, they will get used to players' routes and speed and how quickly they break off their route and whatever. So sure, you'd rather have that with a pro day where, okay, after he's built up a rapport, this is what we will do, rather than throwing to some other wide receiver or tight end from another team. Surely that's what you would want to see. So the athletic part of it, I don't get. If you want to have the athletic part of it, fine, do that at the pro day. I think that's important. If you want to do that, that's fine. Again, do the throwing bit at the pro day, that's fine. Do the weightlifting and the shuttle drills and the cone drills or whatever. Do that then. But at the combine, I really think that should just be for interviews. I think if you want to have interviews with the GMs and the head coaches that are looking to draft you, that's all fine. Get everyone in one place, gather them together, and get them all so that instead of having the head coach and the GMs having to go to every single pro day, or the scouts or everyone being broken, get everyone together in one place to do the interviews. I think that's fine. I think if you want to have the combine just be interviews and then the press and media interviews. So you spoke with the head coach of the Raiders, what do they have to say? Oh yeah, it was a good meeting and all that sort of stuff. If you want to have that all together, that's absolutely fine. The media part of it, a bit like media week at Super Bowl Sunday or media night at Super Bowl opening night at Super Bowl Sunday, do it then. That's absolutely fine. But the athletic part of it, especially when you see more and more people dropping out and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to throw at the combine, but I will throw at my pro day." Again, just more and more and more, we see players not treating the combine with the importance that it once was. I think, again, now with more footage being available and again, more access to players, it's just not quite the same. So I think the combine in its current form needs to either be gotten rid of or completely changed. Because I don't see what the benefit is of any of it. Yeah, fine. Rich Eisen runs his 40-yard dash. That's fine. But he could do that at pro day. What's the most important pro day every year? Go there, coverage. Do his show from there and do the 40-yard dash there. That's fine. But for the athletes and everything, it just means nothing. Because apart from the couple of viral clips, I know there's that one offensive lineman from Iowa that's gone viral because he rocks a mullet and whatever. But other than that, has the combine really excited you like it has in years past? I don't really think so. So let me know what you think. Do you think the combine should stay as it is? Do you think it should be overhauled, or do you think we just get rid of it completely? What would you rather have with the combine moving forward? Leave it down in the comments. Right, and with that, we move on to our third segment, which, as normal, will be a wrap up of some stories that I've seen around the league. Again, not every single story, just because it's far too much to pay attention to, especially when you have a little 9-month-old running around. You can't get everything or be able to get an opinion on everything. So, just some big stories that have happened, and that I've developed an opinion on over the past 2 weeks, shall we say. So, we started with the Los Angeles Rams, and this isn't in any particular order. It's, if anything, just in chronological order that it happened, or at least that I made a note on my phone for it. So we'll see what happened. But we'll start with the LA Rams, who are upgrading Nate Scheelhaase from their passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator, which I think is a good move because I don't really see the advantage of someone going from passing game coordinator straight to a head coach. Now, he was someone who got a lot of attention in head coaching circles, had a couple of interviews. But I would much rather see someone make that progression rather than make that big jump from passing game coordinator to head coach. We've seen we've seen in the past that there are some coaches who are just meant to be coordinators. I said this. I think Arthur Smith, for instance, I think is okay as an offensive coordinator. I don't think he's quite head coach material. If I'm being brutally honest, Kellen Moore, I think, has done a great work as an offensive coordinator, as a head coach. Now he is with the Saints. I'm not totally convinced. There are obviously some people who thought that Eric Bieniemy, great offensive coordinator. Does he really make the step up to head coach? Maybe he didn't interview well, whatever, but there's some that think he's not head coach material. So I think, we see that example. So I would much rather have someone make that, as I say, the slow progression, rather just make the jump from, because again, we can see exactly what he can do with, the extra responsibility and the added pressure, everything in those moments. I think it would be great to have that rather than just make that straight jump. So I think that's a smart move by the Rams. Got a lot of attention. Maybe they're grooming him to be their next head coach. But either way, just doing it slowly, I think is the right way to do it. Now, the next item has sort of gone back and forth when I have it in my notes. This tells you how long ago this was. It was that the Raiders are expecting to keep Maxx Crosby. But now, as time has gone on, I think the reports seem to be indicating that there seems to be more of an indication that he's going to leave. which I think is the right move. I've said before, I think I could understand the Dan Patrick logic when it came to the Raiders and Fernando Mendoza. Okay, you've got the number one pick, fine, but what is the number one pick and the quarterback gonna do if you don't have the pieces around him to make it work, most notably an offensive line? So you're gonna have to fix the problem elsewhere. So okay, if you want to have Mendoza as your quarterback, fine, go for it. But what happens with the rest of it? So then maybe you try and trade off a few of your other pieces to get those more draft picks. And I think someone like Maxx Crosby, it's tough because he's one of the top five, maybe even top three edge rushers in the NFL. So you can get a lot of picks for him, but you can also get a lot of production for him. So it's a tight rope that the Raiders are walking in terms of how to treat it. But I think if you are going to go for a total rebuild, and right, this is the line in the sand was starting now with this rebuild with Fernando Mendoza, then I can kind of understand the logic wanting to get rid of Maxx Crosby and then going further and further and just build using that pick to get the pieces around it. If it's one first round pick to get an extra offensive lineman or two twos or whatever the market is for him, again just to bolster up that squad with as much top talent as you can. I think that is the right way to go. So seems to me that's the way they're going, and I think hard as it may be, I think that's the right move for them to make. News that Aaron Rodgers is expecting to make an announcement mid-March, so maybe even by the time we do our next episode, he'll make an announcement on whether or not he's going to come back. The Steelers have said the door is wide open for him. I'm not really a fan of that. I've made my point about my views about Aaron Rodgers pretty clear in the past. And I think, he didn't really show that much last season to make me think, okay, a year older at his age is going to really do that much more. So I'm happy just letting him go. Honestly, if they want to come, if he wants to come back, fine, but don't make it with us. That's really all I gotta say on that matter. I'd much rather draft a quarterback or go with someone like Mason Rudolph or Will Howard. Just see what we have, especially if we're going through the reset that we're going through. Just start afresh. I don't want Aaron Rodgers hanging about and ruining that, as it were. The Atlanta Falcons are franchise tagging Carl Pitts. I think that's a smart move, at least in a transitional way. Not a transition tag, but let's get him locked in now, and then we can sort out a longer term agreement further down the line. I think that's a smart way to handle it, and at that time with a couple of other players, but Carl Pitts is the main one. The Indianapolis Colts allowing Anthony Richardson to ask for a trade. Again, smart move. I think his time with Indianapolis is kind of done. Injury prone, not really that good. I think they've made, with what's happened with Daniel Jones, he seems to fit well in that system. We saw just how important he was and how bad they were when he got injured. He seems to have found a home there. I think it's time for Anthony Richardson to go and find a home somewhere else. Where that's going to be, I don't really know, but it's going to. I would be stunned if he goes somewhere and instantly becomes a starter. Maybe as a progression, as a quarterback behind an aging veteran, like wherever Aaron Rodgers ends up, say, and then he can learn from him. I think that's fine, but I don't think there's going to be many teams out there that look at him and say, okay, he's going to be our starting quarterback. The who's next? The report cards emerging. Again, this is just in the order of where it's coming along. And I said this was always going to be a bit of a thing. There's no way you could keep this all a total secret. The news was going to come out, and it did. You want to make it as anonymous as you want. In this day and age, someone is going to leak some news, and it did, and teams were put on blast for it as a result. So there's no real point in making this anonymous. Just make it out in the open. Just make it easier for everyone. Just save yourself the hassle of having to do it in secret. David Montgomery being sent to the Texans, I think, is a pretty solid move. I think it allows the Lions to go with Gibbs as their number one running back. David Montgomery can maybe establish himself as a number one with the Texans, or build in a bit of a rotation of running back by committee. I think that would be really good, a good fit for the Texans offense. And the Atlanta Falcons saying they are going to release Kyler Murray. Again, it needed to happen. I've said before, I don't think he's a starting caliber NFL quarterback. As a serviceable backup, fine. Maybe as a backup to someone like Lamar Jackson. Now, we've seen what the injury situations are with him, and if you want a running quarterback, a mobile quarterback, that's a perfect place to be. So go be a backup to Lamar Jackson. We know that it's not a total confirmation that not a total situation that he plays every single game in a season. So go there and you may get a chance to start in, a couple of games and do well there. So I think that would probably be the best place for the Arizona, for Kyler Murray rather, to go. Right, and that is the end of the NFL segment. But there is still time to look elsewhere for another sporting story, just something that's caught my eye. And honestly, it's going to be the World Baseball Classic. I know it's a bit weird because it's because of when it's happening. It's in the middle of spring training, right before the MLB season, whatever. But I really do like the international flair that some things of baseball can bring, especially if you look the Puerto Rico team and the way they celebrate a win. I think it was over the Milwaukee Brewers or something. Just some team in spring training because they've got to get practice games in. And the excitement that was there for just a warm-up game when Juan Soto hit a home run, I think it's just fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this, not just because Great Britain played, and we already beat a team. I can't remember who it was we beat, but we beat one of the MLB teams. So yeah, so the World Baseball Classic I think is good because again you get to see real, quote unquote best on best, like we did with the Winter Olympics with ice hockey. And again, just in a unique way, and again, just the excitement that some of these, particularly the Latino countries bring to it, just because of their flair and their upbringing and their culture. It's just so good to see being brought onto an international level. So I'm going to be watching that. No fun stories to come out of that, but I'm sure there will be in the coming days. But we will get to that when we get to that, because it is the end of the show. I want to thank you, as always, for tuning in and listening. Don't forget, like I said at the start, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, leave a comment, do everything that you can or want to do in order to help this show grow. Don't forget to check us out on our other socials. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. So give us likes, follows, and whatever it is that you need to do on there. And just a quick programming note: we are going to be going to fortnightly shows just as the NFL season moves. I don't quite know how I've managed to time this out with the draft, but it will be bi-weekly just as we move on, and there's somewhat less to talk about in the NFL off season, just so we don't end up doing 5-minute shows every week. I'd much rather have a lot longer show to talk about these things and just give me a little bit more runway to talk about. So we will be taking a week off, and then we'll be back. 2 weeks is St. Patrick's Day, I believe. So 2 weeks time we'll be back. Probably again recording on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, and then coming out the following day. Just a program note, there will be a slight delay, but that's how it's going to be moving forward. But until next time, take care. And as always, as I say, for the next 2 weeks, stay safe.